as well. Thank you very much. Okay, so next we move to item 20, the Knight's Drain, Stormwater Storage and Wetland. So if I could invite staff to the table for this one as well. Have we got people here? No. Okay, and let's in that case then go back to item 12, the review of the rates.
Here, Andrew.
Oh, right, okay, so let's do Knight's Drain next.
You're just having a wee kip after.
Yeah, no, my thinking was that I knew that some of the same staff were presenting on this one, so we'd move on to this, and then we'll go back to 12 then now. So, Knight's Drain, Stormwater Storage and Wetland. Welcome to the table. And we'll start with any questions.
I was just thinking if I could just quickly introduce this by saying that the ITI Committee and the Coastal Community Board, Coastal and Burwood? Coastal, I think. Yeah, I had a joint workshop, I think, only last week, but I'm not sure. Quake Brain, was it? Yeah, and Vicky was really loved it actually. So that was really good. We went over this, and unfortunately David's not in the room, but the feedback from the Coastal Community Board was favourable to the preferred option as well. So we'll get staff to talk us through it.
Great, thank you. So were there any comments that staff wanted to make on the report before we move into questions?
I might just briefly mention this since we've had this topic before council on a number of occasions, so I won't dwell at length on the project, but just to mention that we've gone out to consultation on the preferred option. That feedback has been positive for the majority. The written submissions were tabled in the report in paragraph 6.15. You can see that community views and preferences are described, and that it is the general feeling of the public is it's in support. There were some comments provided, or some concerns raised by some members of the public about the linkage with other open spaces, maintenance of the devices once constructed, also some shared path along Anzac Drive and Pages Road, all of which these issues I believe we can address through the detailed design of the project, noting that some of that open space linkage is challenged by private land ownership. There was also some concern around midges and mosquitoes, and we've sought some advice from internal staff on ecologists on that matter, and report that back in that last briefing, and the view is that that is an issue if it arises, we can manage. The proposed option does include the purchase of 13 properties, which is far and away the major impact of this option. It's still preferred from a technical perspective because of the nature of the land, the location adjacent to the pump station, the resilience that it offers. The total project has included construction already of the completed pump station. Skirt enacted those works for council, and that was within the previous topic, within the subject matter of the previous report. So that work has now been undertaken. We're now ready to take the next step.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Pauline?
Well, I just had one very quick one, and I'm sorry I didn't think of this earlier, but is there any, if we're purchasing the properties to make way for this wetland, I suppose, storage basin, is there any opportunity to actually retain some of that for any housing? Or is it all needed for the project? That way we could sell some back and build fit for purpose, or do you think the land is just too low for it?
The land is very low. It is some of the lowest lying residential land in the city, below mean high tide level. So this land is only occupiable because of the existing stop banking network and pump stations that are constructed. In order to achieve the water quality benefits that we outline in the report, the total area is required. If we were to reduce the area available or being made available through the project, then we'd have to compromise our other values and objectives.
Yanni.
I was just wondering if the new house, whether that's been built high enough to deal with the flooding?
Yes, so the new house was constructed in accordance with the building code, and I've been to that house, and you do walk up quite a number of steps in order to get into the hallway.
So what, in terms of, is it able to be relocated? It just seems such a waste to get rid of a brand new house if we designate it. So is there any solution around either having it remain or having it used for some other use?
Unfortunately, there is not a significant opportunity to have it remain. It's sort of in the middle of the area that we are discussing. I believe there could be opportunities for relocating the house. Typically, we would engage in an open tender process for demolition of properties, and that those contractors would identify any opportunities for relocation and recovery of any material. And I'm sure that any sort of tenders for demolition would consider that matter very closely.
So, but what I can't, sorry, what I'm just trying to understand, why, because it's just in the middle, is that just because of the space required, or you can't acquire some of it which is not the building and put it around it, or?
Absolutely. The reason for the area of the proposed ponds is that the groundwater levels are very high. There's not much excavation volume that we can make before we hit the groundwater. And so in terms of flood retention to achieve water quality objectives, we need a relatively a wider footprint. And unfortunately, if we start compromising by leaving, say, an island in our pond to let that property remain, we would have to compromise, as I mentioned earlier, on the other objectives of the project.
And the second question is around the citywide flood modelling. Like, where is that? When is that coming back to us? And what's the relationship between this project and that piece of work?
The citywide flood modelling project is ongoing. We're seeing early results of that now for the Avon area, and is being considered within the land range recovery program. We haven't been waiting on that modelling work to conclude before we make other decisions. We already have hydraulic models of this area which we have been utilising in our reporting to date and in investigating these options. So we do have the tools available for making informed engineering assessments, and I hope well-informed decisions.
Okay. Just the final question was around when will we get information about the trees? I see in the report that we haven't done a tree assessment and we don't have the information about what will remain. Is it? I know trees are something that are quite important to local communities. So, is there anything that we can get in terms of trying to retain as many trees as possible and getting a report circulated?
Typically, that tree matters are decided upon at the local community board level. There aren't a significant number of trees on the properties in question, and existing delegations I'd have to clarify. However, the proposal is to include extensive landscape treatment. The number of trees we will be planting will far outweigh, assuming that council supports this proposal, far outweigh any tree removals in, I don't know the exact number, sorry, but it'll be a significant multiplier.
Thank you. Dion.
In terms of the properties on the other side of the road, there's just a strip of properties that go on to Bexley Ave, Reserve, I should say. What's the feedback from those people been?
There's been some mixed feedback. We've had some submissions in support of the project saying that they would like to see it proceed and can see some great benefits to the community and to themselves. There has been one written submission in opposition from one of those landowners about flood risk and bringing more water to the site. This treatment device, however, is designed to manage the stormwater that comes off the existing catchment, so we're looking to improve the situation, not make it worse for those residents.
And the other question I had was, in terms of the residential red zone option, have you spoken to Linz about it, or Regenerate Christchurch?
We are in close conversations with Regenerate on a whole number of issues. I think I'd just like to identify that the preferred option and its location is also from engineering principles. The further away we get from the river, the more resilient our structures can be, and also provide the maximum room or space for permanent stop banking measures on alignment. So really the driver in our multi-criteria assessment has identified that the location that is proposed is preferred for engineering reasons, and that discussions with Linz are obviously ongoing on a whole lot of matters.
Thank you. Okay, so Aaron had indicated that you're happy to move this. Pauline, you're happy to second?
Yep.
Yep. So moved Aaron, seconded Pauline. Is there any debate? Young.
I appreciate what this project's going to do, but it does seem to me that you've got the red zone and Bexley Park, and so I just don't support the idea of acquiring private property when we've got so much public land in this vicinity. I think it would be far better use of resource to actually utilise public land, and so I won't be supporting that. I appreciate the work that staff have done on this, but yeah, my view is that we should be looking at either option 4 or using the red zone, so I won't support this today.
It might be useful to get some commentary from staff on the use of the red zone and whether that was actively considered and the reasons that that's not recommended. Yeah, but
sure. As I mentioned just before, that there's there's engineering part decision making here that drives us to put these features as far away from the river as possible in order to provide the greatest resilience to these for this future infrastructure. With particular reference to Bexley Park, that is an old landfill that presents significant risks in terms of contaminated land, and also it's halfway up the catchment, so we wouldn't be able to collect all the water, the discharges to the basin to achieve our water quality outcomes, and come at an increased cost. So it certainly wasn't preferred for a whole lot of reasons.
okay, thank you. Dion and then Pauline.
Yeah, I am so sorry, my voice is really bad, but I won't be supporting this either. From the point of view that I'm actually concerned about the disjointed nature of actually what we're going to do to the community that's going to be left down there. You're going to have a strip of houses that'll just be left there, and I appreciate the engineering advice that we've seen, but I mean it's 40-50 metres over the other side, or a couple of 100 metres at the most, and just reading the reasoning around not using the residential red zone with the significant risk around the short-term access to the land, I think this highlights a bigger issue around the actual disjointed nature of the land that we have in the city, and the communication that we have with the Crown and us about what the future of that residential red zone is. Because I mean, we have a great opportunity with the residential red zone to actually look at the flood modelling around the entire city, yet instead of doing that in the immediate case with this, we're looking at sort of buying properties, one which has already been rebuilt. And I just think, demolishing a house where we've actually got other options, to me it's just not right. And also the nature of disjoining that whole community with just that strip of properties on the right hand side as you go out to New Brighton. I don't think the benefits outweigh the implications that'll happen to that area of the community, and especially with the residential red zone there. So I think we do need to have a really strong conversation with the Crown, Regenerate Christchurch, about these options, and actually putting this as a whole package. Thank you.
Pauline.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'll be supporting this. I think that this is an opportunity to provide improved water quality, which is one of our main goals in Christchurch City Council, with enhancing environmental amenity. Now, if you talk about the strip of houses on the other side, what a wonderful outlook they're going to have with this. This is going to be, and it's a shame we haven't got the picture up there of the proposal, but you'll see it in the report on page 128. And it's got, it's naturalised, it's got walkways, there may be a cycleway going around the side of it, I don't know. This is a really busy corner, and I think that in actual fact, because the land actually sits below the mean high tide level, there's not a huge, it's not really desirable to have housing in there anyway. So I think that there is a sacrifice for a good house, but I'm sure that that can be moved, and the end result is going to be outstanding. And there'll be community engagement here with, as Tom says, with the tree selection, possibly community plantings, who knows? A community group might take it over and look after it. And I think this is a gift to the community, and I really congratulate the staff for coming up on this with this wonderful design here. And I think the land drainage recovery program is really embracing these opportunities where we can to actually have some wins and some environmental enhancement along with water quality improvements. So I'll definitely be supporting this.
Thank you. Glenn and then Vicky.
Thank you. As the local ward councillor and city councillor, I support this option. I support it for various reasons. One is I think it's a good response to the ongoing effects of climate change, which the seismic events in Canterbury have served to fast forward, if you like. The land drop in this area is quite apparent, even without any kind of measurable tools. I mean, you can see it with your own eye. It's pretty obvious. These decisions over how we respond locally to global events are not always easy, including the conversations we must have with the communities affected. I have double-checked with one of my local eyes and ears, being Tim Baker, community board member, who knows the Aranui community and its peoples intimately, and I've had assurance again that I think the staff have done well in communicating with the community over this, because potentially this could have gone another way. I think one of the local papers was hoping it would, but it didn't, and it hasn't. When we look at the options presented in the Orican report, it's not a simple case of is it, for instance, red zone or not. So it's a matrix with many dimensions. And in fact, if I recall the Orican information, it says that if you went to the red zone option, it wouldn't actually prevent flooding in the residential parts of that area. I think I recall that in that report. So for me, this is the most sensible decision. It's not just a matter of getting rid of houses, it's actually providing amenity. It's a good response, picking up on some of the points Councillor Cotter has made. So I urge you to support this. This is important for the whole city, not just this area.
Thank you, Vicky.
I sat through the seminar that these guys ran at ITI. I was hugely impressed with the work that had been done, with the consultation that had happened with the community and with the responses. What I like about this proposal, and I know this land incredibly well, having spent most of my primary school and high school on what was a much larger chunk of land at that stage, so I know most of the most of the land very well. I think what's really important is the point that Pauline made. This affects our water quality, and we have to do it. We can't go over the road to the Bexley Tip. I watched that being filled and closed. You would not want to dig down there, believe me. What we also do with this is actually take proactive action, which is what other parts of the city have just been asking us for. This protects 60 houses from flood intrusion, and it actually creates a really lovely environmental feature. You will have seen some of those houses actually on the market and struggling for some time, especially near the corner of Anzac Ave and Pages Road. What we create here is a brilliant, almost a feature, and one that has all sorts of environmental responses and benefits in terms of flood prevention, water quality, which is, along with climate change, our #1 priority, and actually creates something that looks substantially, it looks amazing, I think, when we've finished this. So I'm don't usually enjoy drainage seminars that go on for a very long time, but I have to say I was hugely impressed by what's been done here and by the logic and the compelling logic of what you've come up with. So I'm totally in favour of this.
Thank you. Dave.
Thank you. I'm going to support this motion again, and probably what a lot of people don't realise, and I think Glenn alluded to it earlier, this piece of land is actually sunk more than even the lowest part of South Brighton, and it is particularly vulnerable to a lot of flooding, and the intersection nearby, despite recent expensive work, still floods, and I think this wetlands would obviously benefit for that. I know Councillor Buck's going to fall off her chair in a minute, but I support everything she said. And it's becoming a bit of a habit, really, but it's a good one. And likewise, the comments that were expressed by Councillor Cotter also were very valid points. With respect to the residential red zone, look, I have absolute confidence in the messaging we have had from the engineers that creating a basin close to the river is going to create issues. They have to pump to and fro, and it's really not an ideal option to go there. This is the sort of natural and obvious place for this system to be implemented. And lastly, I think it's quite evident that the consultation that was conducted on this project was not only well supported by the people that are actually affected, but also a number of adjoining residents were well supportive of this as well. So I think for a huge number of reasons it's been well researched. The engineering and the work that staff have gone into this project has been superb, and I think it's just should be passed. Thank you.
And finally, Aaron.
Yeah, I started my position here on this decision in the same place as Yanni and Dion. I was quite opposed. Mainly my grounds were around removing houses, especially one good one, because it just seems like such an incredible waste. But that 2 hours spent in that seminar with Tom, and normally I'd say it's 2 hours I'll never get back, that's actually 2 hours that I'll keep, because you won me over with good science. And the main reason for not doing it across my biggest point was, why wouldn't you do it across the road in the red zone, was just pumping the water over and back again under the road made no sense, just to achieve the same thing. If we had a blank slate and we were designing our city from scratch, and we should think like that a lot during a recovery of such a massive event, is that we wouldn't be building houses here. There wouldn't be anyone living in this spot. In fact, if this loses today and these people do stay there, we should rename the area Little Amsterdam, because it's below sea level at certain times of the day. So maybe that could be its way forward if it loses the debate. But following the earthquakes in those weeks and months, you'll remember on Pages Road, for those that visited that area, it looked like Pages Road was just filled with truckloads of gravel, and it was like a big berm in the middle just to have a road to get through, because there was water down each side and huge pumps. Like, the place was a mess, and that's how much it dropped. So yeah, I think this is a great way forward. Thanks to the staff for doing the work, and let's support it. We don't need a Little Amsterdam in the east.
Thank you. And like Vicky, land drainage projects aren't always, for me, the easiest thing to get excited about. But, you know, here we've got something that has got some real amenity. It'll become a real feature for the area. Some very positive environmental outcomes, and actually will really be an enhancement not only of the environment but of the situation in that part of town. I was always, as with these projects where local people are going to be affected, very pleased to hear that there's local resident support, community board support, the ward council obviously speaking in support, and other councillors from that side of town speaking in support as well. So, like Aaron, I certainly don't want to be embracing the concept of Little Amsterdam, and I'll be supporting this today. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you.